An invitation to reclaim has been the catalyst in the My Library MySpace engagement programme, led by Rising Arts Agency throughout 2020 and 2021. Commissioned by Bristol City Council, this project has been an arts-led alternative approach to considering how the existing estate of library buildings might more sustainably serve the city of Bristol, in particular, its young people. This is a process of radical experimentation that seeks to form new social sustainable models, strategies and visions. Not to suggest a need for more civic buildings, but to test what more these civic buildings might be. Young artists from diverse creative fields have been brought together to stomp and break new ground. My Library MySpace has been led by Lisa Awajobi, Alexa Ledetsky and Melisa, interdisciplinary producers, strategists and artists, who have in turn engaged a cohort of creators in this shared endeavour. Esther Hesketh, Sophia Harari, Aaliyah Douglas and myself, Jade Ayino. Our objective of this in-depth investigation is the sense that we share ownership of library buildings themselves, but arguably more importantly, ownership of the processes, methods and visions. We hope to refresh the stigmas around libraries, suggest new ways to inhibit them, and find ways to encourage, build and empower an audience of library users. New futures for old buildings to emerge.
Yeah, it's been a really interesting project. I've been able to meet a lot of really interesting people from different fields that I wouldn't have been able to engage with otherwise, and be able to have really specific conversations about specific parts of the concepts we've been exploring about space and books and reading and our relationships with library spaces and local communities.
I do feel that when spaces like libraries become stagnant or become stale because of lack of movement due to things that are happening outside that we cannot control, I think it's important to remember that community and people and celebration coming together in a space is what keeps spaces like this alive.
Yeah, so being part of the project, it's been kind of quite a nice organic learning process. So we've had lots of different workshops and sessions, really talking to a range of people to do with the library. The way we've been working, I'd really like that our projects and our interactions within the space are kind of lived on, whether that be through imagery or kind of resources or footage of the events and activities that we've done, just so people can kind of realise and know that there are things happening and things will continue to happen in the space if people are there and people are excited for it.
I hope that people engage with the library space differently once we're able to share how that can be done. That's sort of one of my hopes for this project, is people will then see the space differently and therefore engage with it differently.
It was about finding out from 16 to 25-year-olds about what they thought about libraries and whether what would make a library an interesting space, because they're probably the group of people who are least likely to think a library is their space.
My role was to try to reform the way we think about libraries. So I did that through creating a piece of literature in the form of a short story. I was inspired by young people that I spoke to, in which they told me that they feel like libraries are a space where their voice isn't really heard.
With my work inside the space, I think it's important to create an immersive environment for people to engage in. I love it when I visit exhibitions and they've just completely transformed a four-walled, white-walled space.
So the cohort was the highlight. I mean, I really loved actually connecting the members of the cohort with other people within like the artist community that we're very linked with. And for me, the really special moments were when a member of the cohort said, "Oh, my mentor is literally the perfect fit for me," or this person who you put me in contact with, actually, they've been really helpful for me in terms of my creative practice beyond this project.
Another form of value would be just being able to come together and share like our responses for a common cause, and hopefully for it to make like transformational changes for the future.
My reflection is that we live in challenging times and we have to work in partnership to solve or meet the challenges. And partnership is hard and it takes time and communication, and I think we've learned a lot in this project about that.
I think the intimacy of this particular programme and event means that the conversation we have can be deeper and therefore more meaningful, which means we can get more from it.
My hope is that we find an alignment between an age group that don't tend to use the library, and their ideas will really benefit everybody who wants to use a library. So I hope it's the beginning rather than the end of a project.
Even though like a lot of time we just think it's books, there's so much that goes on behind, and having more of a stake in that has meant that actually I'm a lot more invested. So going forward, especially as I begin to see more artwork up that the members of the cohort have put up, I definitely want to be continuing to be part of that conversation.
I think if young people are at the precipice of conversation about how to use the space, it means that their insight can really give value in a situation where it may not have been before. And as a young person, you also then have knowledge of what other young people want from that space.
My first interaction with a library in Bristol wasn't the best, because I just remember it being a place that was just quiet and silent, couldn't make any noise. And as I said, a lot of the responses that I got from young people was that they felt like libraries were a place where they had no voice. And I think we're living in an age where being able to be vocal and verbalise your opinions, especially for young people, is becoming so much more important.
Bristol is a very diverse city, but we're not that well integrated. There's not much sort of crossover. The different communities that we have are actually quite distinct and separate. So I'm thinking about, okay, how can a public space be a point of contact for bringing those different kinds of communities together to actually learn from each other and to share in a much more meaningful way.
I think what we are doing here is very powerful, because we're showing other young people that it doesn't really matter where you are or how you are or who you are, but you can actually be in a space and make it your own, as long as you have the drive and ambition to actually do that. So I feel that this project in particular will really, well, I hope this project in particular will empower other young people to just get involved in projects in your community and just like mesh it up, put it through the blender, turn it around, bend it and bounce it, and make it a place that's safe for you and your friends, basically.